Where the hell is he? Anything on your side? No!
When the first gameplay trailer of the XIII remake came out, I immediately had my issues with it. It didn't really look that polished and the gunplay looked pretty dreadful. Now, I'm always going to give a game a chance. I have a very weird taste in games. You'd be surprised the kind of games I can play religiously, yet the remake of XIII, I don't like it. Just plain and simple, this is not a good remake. This is a very shallow and lifeless remake. Originally, earlier this year, I had a plan to replay the original version of XIII and then play the remake and compare the two in a video. In the end, I thought, you know what, I don't really want to play through the game twice. I'd rather just wait for the remake to come out and just play it on its own and do it as its own thing. And I really regret doing that because the remake is that poor in quality that it's kind of ruined it for me slightly. I still love the original and I'm probably going to go back and replay that someday soon. But how do you fuck up a remake like this? XIII is a standard first-person shooter in today's age, and you had the source code from Ubisoft. I don't get it. This game feels like a remaster, but it's not a remaster because it's been built from the ground up on a new engine in Unity, and it just feels so bad. In fact, you can tell the quality standards of this game immediately from the get-go because right at the start of the game, when you start the story, the first cutscene is just the original cutscene from the original game played on a projector to make it look... Well, no, basically to excuse the low quality because obviously the original hasn't got like 1080p standards, it's a really low res video file. So instead they have it play over a projector which someone from the FBI in the actual game is watching, and you do go into that area of the game later on, which is a clever little nod to it, I guess. But I don't really want to go over the story in this. I don't want to compare the original to this, I just want to look at it as its own thing, as a remake. I might come back and do a video on the original XIII someday because I still think the original holds up pretty well today if you use the community patch. And honestly now, if you want a too long didn't read, I would recommend picking up the classic version on GOG or Steam and then just downloading the community patch for it. Hell, I'll even put a Steam guide link in the description for you to look at if you're curious. So when you boot up XIII and you get into the game, the first thing you're immediately going to notice is the visuals. The original XIII had a visual art style of like a comic book, and back in the day it looked pretty damn good. Obviously if you compare it to games from today's age like Telltale's The Walking Dead, it hasn't aged all that well visually. I think for the most part it has aged pretty damn well, but a modern version of this with the comic book art style, you would expect to see something like a Telltale game. And instead, and I hate to say this, it looks like it's trying to copy Fortnite. Obviously cel shading is not a new thing, we've had stuff like Borderlands and all these other games that go for it, and you know, it is a good art style. I genuinely like cel shading and more cartoony looking games. I think in some areas they can age much better than realistic looking ones. But because of games like Fortnite, it has become way more generic, and you know, games have to put a bit more effort into making them stand out. XIII's remake doesn't do this. It looks bland, the first character you see looks like they're from Fortnite, and the inconsistency in the map itself looking between realism and cartoon or comic is so annoying, and it just doesn't look that good. The amount of life and detail in the original game and the charm from the comic book art style in it, especially when you kill people from a distance, all of that is just gone. None of it feels like any love or effort has been put into it. It feels like such a shallow attempt of a remake, and it doesn't get any better from here. The only thing I can praise from it is that the voice lines are still in the game. So you've still got Adam West in the game, which is nice to see. I'm all for that. It's like Medieval. If they've got the uncompressed files for it, they might as well use them, because they still sound pretty good. But with the issues like the sound mixing and everything else, you can't appreciate it because you can't hear it half the time. There are points in this game where they'll be saying something important to you and I just can't hear it. I've got the volume set to max, I've got my headphones turned up because I can't hear it. Instead you can hear either the music, which will cut out half the time, or the audio from an enemy which is really far away, or the gunshots, which again, the word I want to use is generic. None of the guns feel like they have any weight to them, and the sounds don't help this. Normally in a game, the two things you will look at when you want to make a gun feel good or impactful is stuff like the animations or the weapon sounds. Or hell, you could just go with the recoil or the actual fire rate. And none of these in this game feel good. None of the guns feel fun to use. The starting pistol, for example, it sounds weak, it feels weak, and the recoil is just pathetic. Yes, you can use a Kimbo if you really wanted to, but even that doesn't feel that good, and half the time it breaks. The animations in this game are so clunky. At a point I used a grappling hook and then my guns just disappeared. I could still fire them, the gun still worked, and then once I reloaded one of them, only one gun reappeared. This wasn't caught in testing. This happened more than once and it was quite frequent. I've had people glitch into the floor. I've had enemies not even recognise that I'm there when I'm standing right next to them. The AI is piss poor in this game. There are moments where I've watched an enemy struggle to shoot me. I've stood still and I've got a perfect clip for this. At the end of the rooftop level, when you get to the helicopter, one of the enemies just kept running around trying to shoot me and half the time missed. I wasn't even trying to hide or duck for cover or anything. I just kind of watched him and I observed to see how the AI pathing worked in this game. And I mean, you can see for yourself, it doesn't look that good. Now, I could excuse this in a sense because this is a remake of a fairly old game. But the point of a remake instead of a remaster is you're meant to fine tune this stuff. You're meant to improve where there were problems in the original. And I feel like this is somehow worse in the original. There's also some other issues that I've had with this game. Like, an ammo box would change its position in height depending on how close I was to it. I don't honestly understand how that works, but it's a thing and it happened more than once. There's also some very big problems with the PC port. Now, I've heard from people on Twitter that the PlayStation 4 port and the Xbox One port isn't much better. It has a lot of frame drop issues and a lot of visual tearing. The PC port isn't far from having those kind of issues. The performance is very inconsistent at best. I've seen it drop down to 20 for no reason. Keep in mind I have an RTX 2080 Super and an i7. This game should run fine. It doesn't look that visually challenging, and yet sometimes the game will just shit itself. Now, optimization issues I can kind of get around. I don't mind them too much as long as I can actually play the game. I mean, I beat Borderlands 2 years ago at about 15 frames per second in a 640 in like a tiny little windowed resolution, like 640 by 480 or something small like that. But with this game, and I've looked into this and people in the community have said the same thing, the mouse acceleration in this game, which you can't turn off by the way, there's no way to turn it off in the config or in the settings, is linked to the frame rate. And at first I didn't believe this was true, but then at points where even if you have VSync and a frame lock on, you'll notice this. At points where the frame rate increases and you're turning the camera, it will speed up rapidly. I don't understand mouse acceleration. I've never understood why anybody would want to use this. But why the hell would you link mouse acceleration to the frame rate of a game? It was bad enough in Dark Souls where they had the issue of a higher frame rate would mean your weapon durability would break quicker. That was bonkers enough. But to have mouse acceleration linked to your frame rate in a game that is so poorly optimized baffles me. And I mean, it gets even better. The game has aim assist for mouse and keyboard, aim assist which if you turn it off, doesn't actually turn off properly. Instead, it will bug out half the time and lock your camera. I had a point in the game when I was doing the second level in the bank where I couldn't even fully look up or down. I got stuck. It was, I want to say, a 45 degrees angle. I couldn't fully look down at the floor, I couldn't fully look up. If a sniper had started shooting at me at that point, I would have been fucked. I really have nothing good to say about this game. This is one of the worst remakes I've ever seen, and it is upsetting to see a game I cared a lot about just be abused. Now, I don't know if it's due to the developers buying up more they can chew, because I've never heard of Play Magic before today, or if it's just something to do with this publisher, because I've seen them just release half-assed games in the past. But to me, this remake feels like they just wanted to basically chew off some nostalgia profit, and they went, what game can we do which, has a bit of a niche following and would interest some new people due to the excitement from fans of the original? And then they got their hands on the 13 license. But honestly, if you want to play 13, just buy the original. On Steam or GOG, it's about £5 maximum, and there is a guide that will fix a lot of the issues with the resolution and also the mouse problem, which isn't anywhere near as bad as it is in the remake. And just appreciate the original for what it was. It'll have some, it's definitely rough around the edges, but it's nowhere near as bad as this remake. Also, take into consideration the price. 13, the classic 13 edition is £5 like I said. The remake is £35. This isn't a AAA game, don't treat it like one.